Welcome to Reflections on Identity, a podcast series exploring educators' narratives on their professional identity. Today, we are talking to Emma Fuller, who is a senior advisor for school improvement. Emma, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking to us. Could you just say a little bit about your role to start things going, please?
Yeah, certainly. And thank you for inviting me. Okay, so as you've just said, my title is Senior Advisor for School Improvement. That probably doesn't really encompass all that I do. So I do work for the local authority in a school improvement advisor role. And I'll talk a little bit more about school improvement work in a moment. And I also head up our school improvement team within the local authority. So sort of two strands to my role. And I'll give a bit more detail about both of those. I think the first thing to say is school improvement in itself, I think, can be a bit of a funny term in the way that it's interpreted. And people tend to think that if I say that I'm a school improvement advisor, that I'm working with schools who have got difficulties or who need to improve. Um, and I would refute that. We work with all of our schools because actually education is a continuous journey and it's about the role that we play in supporting our schools to, as a critical friend, that challenge, that sort of mentor coach, working in different ways with them to move on from wherever they are in that journey and that continuous cycle of school improvement that all schools are in. So, as a school improvement advisor, I do have my own caseload of schools that I support. Um, in lots of different ways. It's a very varied role, but it's generally about supporting school leaders in identifying their priorities, in supporting them with their priorities, or in other aspects of leadership. So, even just some examples from this week, there's been head teacher shortlisting, there's been head teacher interviews, there's been offset inspections. It's that whole wider breadth of school work and working with school leaders, including governors. So, yes, it's looking at all aspects of school life. Um, then I head up, as I said, the school improvement team within the local authority. I should say, actually, with this my school improvement advisor work, I am from a primary background, so and the school improvement advisor work tends to be mainly with our local authority maintained primary schools. Although we have some statutory duties for all primary schools, and then we have a few statutory duties for all schools. I head up the school improvement team, and within the team, we've got lots of subject specialists as well as school improvement advisors. And the subject specialists tend to work with all schools in a much wider range than school improvement advisors who are working with the primary. So they go up to and including Key Stage 5 in some of the work that they do. So, as part of heading up that, I've obviously the leadership and management of that team, and that's much wider in terms of HR processes, budgets. It's all the things that you would expect from leading and managing a team. Um, and then there's the other aspects of my work in terms of being within the local authority. So thinking about working with colleagues in other teams who also support schools, perhaps in different ways through property, building works, those kind of things. And then there's the networking. Going back to that, sort of, yes, thinking about property, silly things like boilers breaking down in the winter and schools needing support there with closure, but also with the fixing of things. Um, I work with, as part of the networking in my role, I work with trust CEOs. I network, I sit on a number of boards because ultimately we're all here to try and think about the children in our local authority and making sure that they've got the right opportunities to achieve, to thrive, and that we're all in it to do the very best that we can for those children. Um, yeah, so that's a sort of wider, and obviously I sit within the county council, so I'm accountable to our elected representatives. So reports and things to them too. So that's a very quick summary, but it's very wide and very varied.
I mean, it's hugely varied, isn't it? In terms of the roles and responsibilities, it's incredibly varied. Would you say, with that in mind, your professional identity is something you're mindful of, or that's important to you, or is it something kind of below the surface?
I think that's a really interesting question. I think I've become more aware of my professional identity as I've gained experience or changed roles within education. I say I come from a primary background. I think when you're in leadership, I think you probably think about it more because you're very aware of how you've got to manage the team and how you are responding to things and how you're internalizing that. But I do think a lot of my role is just me, if that makes sense. I think there's a lot of intrinsic values that I hold that I would bring to any role. And actually, it doesn't matter what role that is. The way I approach it, the way I'm doing it is the same. It's my beliefs, my values, the behaviors. Although, as I say, they have been shaped perhaps by the experience or opportunities I've had and the contexts that I've worked in as I've got to this point. So, for example, I am very conscious in the leadership of my team. I'm obviously managing a wide range of individuals, and I've worked for various leaders. So, you pick up on things that you think other leaders have done well and that you want to emulate. So, I pull those into my professional identity. But there are other things I think, well, actually, I've got my own way of doing that, and that's what I'm going to carry on doing, or that's what's more comfortable and actually is more true to myself, if that makes sense. So it's making it work within those values and beliefs that I have for myself.
And what would you say are your core values and beliefs, Emma? And have they always been the case? I mean, have you noticed any changes from moving from being a primary teacher to this more sort of strategic managerial role?
Um, yes, so I think there are some inherent, some inherent things that are always there. So I think, I do think that I try and be approachable, that I'm honest, that I'm open, that people can come to me, that I'm fair, that I'm consistent, so that there are those kind of things. But I think, again, as I have progressed and had different roles in my career, you do become, I think, much more aware. And certainly working for a local authority, I'm much more aware of the context that I'm working with, the institution that I'm working in, and how that might shape some of the behaviours that are expected as well, or certain ways that we have to respond to things, if that makes sense. So again, just an obvious example of that is use of social media and being very careful that I have got quite a visible presence in the role that I do. So how I use social media and what's out there in the public domain, and being very careful about that. So yes, I think there's more conscious thought about what I'm doing, how I'm behaving, and making sure that I am keeping within the expectations of myself. Actually, I think some of it comes from my own expectations as well as those of the context that I'm working within.
And do you think your identity is in any way kind of collaborative, Emma, or that it has sort of a social expectation, or is it something you see as inherently, I suppose, embodied in you rather than seen? I mean, would you have other school improvement advisor colleagues who you would work with, or within the county or the local authority, or even within the schools? Do you get a sense that you've got a kind of a collective identity with others, or is it something you think's inherently just in for yourself?
I think it's the collaboration. I think coming into education, I think it is a collaborative community. It has to be. Education in itself is always changing. There's always new things happening. There's always new things coming out. And I think actually what helps me in my role is the strength of my team and the fact that we are all different individuals. We're all keeping up to date with different things. We can discuss, we can challenge each other, we can have those conversations and work together. Whether it's the bureaucracy that's coming out around education or a new piece of research or whatever it is, I think having the opportunity to talk about that as a team, that collaboration is really important to me. But also, as I've already said, the collaboration between different stakeholders. We're all here because essentially we're here for the pupils, for the learners, and making sure that that's right. So I think that's really important, especially as the landscape of education has changed so much over the last 10, certainly since in my career, but, with the rise of multi-academy trusts or individual trusts, there's lots of different bits now and lots of different organizations, or we've got the subject hubs, there's lots of things going on, but actually to make sure that we're all working together in the best interests of our learners, I think is really important, and that networking and learning from each other. At the end of the day, I think we are a community of learners supporting learners. And I think the moment that I feel that I'm not learning anymore is probably the moment that I need to stop doing it. I'm also in a really privileged position, working with all the schools that I go into, and I've got that sort of public face, and I'm involved in lots of schools. And that I learn as much from them as they can from talking to me, and or say it's more of a coach mentor role most of the time in terms of discussing things or finding ways forward. But that's the most amazing collaboration and CPD that I could have in terms of being able to go and then support other schools. And I think actually, if I was asked what would be really useful for heads or for people working in education, it is to go and see other settings, see other contexts, because actually no two schools are the same. And seeing how the same thing might look different in different places and how we can work together to make some of these things work for our children is really important.
No, I think that comes over really strongly, doesn't it? Your passion for learning and learners. And I mean, we had our colleague Lucy Roberts was on a while back and saying something very, very similar to you, Emma, in terms of this sort of perpetual environment for learning and making that conducive for colleagues and for the children. Has there ever been times where you feel like your professional identity has been challenged at all, or where you've been in contexts where that identity maybe doesn't align completely with what's been going on in terms of work, or does it feel it's been pretty cohesive and straightforward in your career?
I think I've been very fortunate, and that for most of my career, it has been very cohesive and straightforward. Having said that, I think there are always challenges, and it's about how you approach those challenges. I do think I'm quite resilient. I do think I'm quite a positive person and will always try and make the best of any situation. I think if I was really struggling, or if I was somewhere where the values didn't align to the values that I hold dear, then again, it's not the right place for me to be. And we quite often say that just going, when we get some of, again, the role that I do, working with initial teacher training or new heads, all of those, or ECTs, it's about finding the fit for you, because actually schools are different. And although everybody is there with the same intentions, it does look different in different places and with different contexts. Um, but I can also see, I think, the amount of agency you might have in your role. So I'm very lucky that I do have quite a lot of agency, even though I say we work within a big organization, that I can try and work with what within those confines, if that makes sense. But I think that could have the potential to really influence identity. And I see that as well in the work that I do, where people sort of perhaps it's got too much, and the positive turns to negative. And I think that's where in education as well, we start to really see well-being as an issue, um, because that's changed, and it's how we manage that. And yeah, there's that. I think there's a lot of that agency within your role, and how that affects your approach, whether to some of the things that perhaps aren't as you'd like them, and whether you can manage it or not.
Emma, thank you so much for your time and taking time out from a busy week at a busy term to sort of share what I think are really, really important points around how local authorities and other agencies can support schools and the relationships between those and how that supports you in terms of your own professionalism. So thank you so much for coming on the episode and enlighten us with that. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
You have been listening to Reflections on Identity. We hope you can join us for the next episode in our series. Click on the bell icon or follow for notifications. We'd also love to hear from you, so please put your thoughts in the comments. Bye for now.